Welcome to Prepper School number 3 on Sensible Prepper. Sorry we missed you guys on Tuesday. My dad had some medical emergencies and we weren't really sure we were going to get it today, but he's doing fine. Just really appreciate you guys coming out and checking us out. Robbie Wheaton, which is typically here, has had some things going on, so we didn't make it today. But we really do appreciate Robbie for being here. It's a big asset to our whole thing. I mean, he's just great and owns Wheaton Arms, and check that out. But he's really good, especially at gun stuff, because he's been a gunsmith for over 20 years. Now, we're going to get into a number of things today that are going to be a little bit more specific than what we've talked about so far. The first week, we just talked about the announcement. We're doing Prepper School. We went through some just basics, grand ideas, large thoughts, and just kind of put it together. Last week, we talked about, basic being prepared. And I mean, being prepared on an everyday basis, which everyone should be at some point. Whether it's having an emergency kit for your car, having a fire extinguisher. Yes, it is Veterans Day. Sarah Mack just reminded me that it is Veterans Day, which we definitely are honored, and we need to honor our veterans. It's just, especially right now, guys, there's a lot going on with the military, and we need to have them in our thoughts and prayers. But we really appreciate all of our veterans. And if you're a veteran out there watching, we appreciate everything that you've done. It is a service to our great nation. Now, on volume 3, what we're going to talk about is getting into some basics. And if you've never gotten started, we're going to get into some thoughts about how to get started, what to do. Guys, if you're just getting started, or whether you've been a prepper like me for over 30 years, it's overwhelming, and it's still overwhelming because we're trying to get together the basics of life. But there are some rules and some things that you need to consider when you're getting started. Now, again, these are things, guys, that you may consider yourself a prepper, and you may have been a prepper for a while, but these are some things that you may be able to take a look at and think about. So got me a list over here to see and kind of go through. We will be taking some questions coming up. And so get your questions ready. You can go ahead and start asking questions now. Sarah Mack's going to go ahead and start keeping those. And so when we take a break, we'll jump into some of the questions. We do appreciate Sportsman's Guide. They sponsored today's episode. Those guys, number one, they've been around for over 40 years. They supply, tons of military surplus stuff. They're one of the best resources for military surplus. But also they have camping, fishing, firearms. They do the whole gamut. And you get $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Sootch. Just SOOTCH. And guys, it's great. I use that coupon code all the time because it's just a great resource for preppers. And one of the things about especially survival stuff or military surplus is that it's field tested, it's proven, and yet because they're bringing it in, it's fairly inexpensive. It's a great way to get started. So great resource. Also, if you're part of their buyers club, you get free shipping and you get a better price, and it's well worth it because I'm a member of their buyers club. So with that being said, guys, number one is to make a plan. You've got to have some kind of idea about what you're doing. One of the things that's really easy to do is just to get panicky and just go out and just start buying stuff. And you run to the, which I hate Walmart, but you run to the Walmart camping supplies and you're grabbing every little gadget and thing that you can find, which they're super cheap already, but you're just finding stuff, you're putting it in, you're just thinking about some food, you're throwing some food in there, you're throwing some water in there, you're just kind of throwing stuff together and you're just gathering supplies. It's important to have a plan. It's important to kind of be able to bring all that together. Now, one thing about it, and last week we talked about standard power outages. Standard, you're in the snow for 2 weeks at the house. Especially according to where you live, or there's a flood, or, a number of things that just happen on a regular basis. Those are a great way to get started. The things that you're going to need for a basic hurricane or things that are going to carry you through initially with even a survival situation. So it's important to be prepared for the problems that you have and then to build on it. But one thing that we've got to be careful of is to prepare for all contingencies. Now, you say, Sootch, that just drives us crazy because that means everything. Let me just say this. Back in October of last year, before COVID, actually 2019, I was walking from the shop. I was coming to the house, and I just thought, am I really doing what's right by this Sensible Prepper channel? I mean, the economy was booming. Things were going great. Gas prices were coming down. Things were just really done. I mean, everything was kind of going really smooth. We had a decent relationship with China, and there were a lot of things going on. And I really considered, what am I doing? Is this really right? Because I want to do the right thing. And I just had this peace, just keep going with what you're doing. COVID-19 hit. When COVID hit, everything went crazy. That was not anything that anybody was expecting, except maybe Bill Gates and Fauci. But nobody was expecting that. And so, you can plan for this certain scenario, that certain scenario, but you never know what's really going to happen. Back in 1944 and 45 in Holland, the Nazi Germans had actually occupied the country of Holland. And in 45 and 44, they started sending all of the food that was in Holland to Germany. And it's called the Hunger Winter. And thousands of people died of starvation. Thousands. The Dutch had no idea that was going to happen. They had no idea. And guys, the whole thing is in history, these kind of sudden events have happened all throughout history, and they can happen again. Just like the COVID, just like with the Dutch winter, we're seeing a lot of supply chains and things that are already starting to give us some concern. And so we need to be ready for those things. Now, let me give you a plan. First off, if you're just getting started, guys, you need to have at least get 1 month under your belt. 1 month of water, 1 month of food, 1 month of your medical supplies, all the different things that are on your list. Get 1 month. And when you build that 1 month, then you can step out to 6 months, to a year. Don't run out and buy a year's worth of toilet paper and yet you don't have food or you don't have a way to filter your water. Make sure that you balance it out. Balance is everything. Now, I'm going to give you a website, and this is hilarious, but you go to FEMA.gov. In fact, the link's down below in the description. Go to FEMA.gov, click on it. They will recommend this is what you need for your home emergency kit. And this is what you need if you have to evacuate. And it will give you a pretty well-rounded list. Now, there are other things, obviously, if you're prepper-minded, that you want to kind of up. But one of the big things is it gives you a baseline. And I did a video actually years ago about FEMA.gov. A lot of people distrust the government, and for good reason. But that is one resource that you can look at, and they recommend having these things ahead. So this isn't just some survivalist nut. These are people that have said, look, these things happen. You need to be ready for them. Now, there are 3 rules, and these are the rule of threes. And this is what I call foundational. When it comes to rule of threes, it's 3 seconds without hope. And guys, if you're even thinking about prepping and you're starting to put some things together, it gives you hope. It gives you peace of mind. Like my good friend David over at Southern Prepper One says, be prepared, not scared. And so once you kind of put some things together, that gives you that base. Secondly, 3 minutes without air. You got to think about any kind of problems that may occur that could, cause a problem with your breathing. So it's very important. But here's the thing about that. That is something that typically is kind of outside of a lot of things. But yet we see with the mask and all the different things that have happened over the past year, there is some validity to it. 3 days without water. Water's a big one. 3 weeks without food. And I skipped 3 hours in harsh conditions, guys. You got to maintain that body heat. You got to maintain that balance with your temperature. 3 weeks without food. Medical and security flow in between. So you always need to make sure. So what I do is, whether I'm getting together my home preps for me and my family, also contingency plans for friends that might come by, it's good to have some extras. but also for my get home bag, for my bug out bag. Rule of threes will help you to kind of keep a balance. Balance is everything. You know, one of the things that happens is a lot of times we run out of balance because we're buying this, a lot of this, and we're not taking care of the other. Toilet paper was a big one. I have a good friend of mine that's been a prepper as long as I have. He and I have made a lot of plans together. We have prepper groups. We do things. When COVID hit, they didn't have toilet paper. I mean, they just didn't have enough toilet. They had other things, but they didn't have a balance. He ended up putting a bidet in his bathroom, which was just probably a pretty cool idea. But guys, again, you can be a long-term prepper and miss certain places. With that being said, let's talk about the curve. The curve is something that we all need to watch for. We're going along. All of a sudden, we start hearing things, and a few people will start preparing because they're hearing things ahead of time. Then all of a sudden, when the public becomes aware that there is a crisis, then it skyrockets. And the problem is if you haven't already prepared your items, you're going to find yourself without. Ammunition was a big one this past year. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, ammunition shelves just bare. I mean, boom, people buying up ammo. In fact, it really surprised me in one way. When all the supplies of ammo ran out, a lot of people started panicking. Prices went up. You couldn't even get certain type ammo. We still can't get 44 Magnum. I mean, there's certain ammos we just can't get. And we're sponsored by Fiocchi. They just don't have it. And so one of the things about it is being prepared ahead of time. So when that curve starts, you're starting to ramp up. And then when it hits, you're in good shape. So you got to be careful to get ahead of that panic. And the curve is very important. I'll give you a great example. You know, just a couple of months ago, we had the gas shortage. And, you know, we had the cyber attack on the gas company. The pipelines were shut down. When I first heard about it, I got in touch with everyone in the family. I said, guys, we've got a problem. You know, run out and fill up your tank with gas. So what happened was a lot of guys, you know, my family, they went to the gas station. I jumped in the Hummer, ran up, filled my tank up. Then I thought, wait a minute, I've got gas cans. Ran home, got some jerry cans, came back. Now, one of the things that shocked me, this was actually already on Fox News, is there was nobody getting gas. There was a couple of cars, just like normal, getting gas. I'm like, is this really the right thing to do? But I went ahead and I filled up all my gas cans, had my car filled up, went and got my truck, brought it up, filled it up. All the family got their gas. Within 4 or 5 hours, pandemonium was hitting these gas stations. People were lined up. People were running out of gas. Everything was happening. Again, prime example. Definitely just get ahead of the curve, because once it hits, you're not going to be able to meet the needs that you have. And one of the things about this, and I'll give you another example. I went to Best Buy the other day. I needed a camera. My camcorder, $1,000 camcorder, it just quit working. Sometimes when we're doing stuff, especially with firearms, sometimes a tripod can get kicked and hits the ground, and and camera went out. I ran up to Best Buy, and that's where I bought the camera before. Well, they had a sample there, and when I asked the guy, I said, I want one of these cameras, and he goes, we don't have them. And I said, well, when are you going to get them? He goes, it'll be at least a week. He said, the microchip shortage, he goes, it's affecting the electronics industry. He goes, you can't get this camera. If I would have had $5,000, I couldn't have bought the camera. Now, maybe I could have bought that sample demo camera, but I couldn't have bought it. Didn't matter what kind of money I had. Didn't matter. It was just gone. And that's one of the things you're going to face, is that if we have true shortages, you may not be able to get the necessary things that you have. Now, thank goodness he went to this other side. It was kind of hidden, and there was a camcorder there. And he said, we have this camera, though. And I bought it. So I was able to work it out. But the problem is because of shortages, you just may not be able to get the supplies you need. That's why it's so important to get them now. And again, just like with ammo. So getting ahead of the curve. Now, one of the big things that a lot of people do, they don't prioritize. Let me just say this. Food is greater than that new $100 knife you want to buy. So if you run out and you're like, I need that $100 knife, and that's cheap. I carry a Microtech LUDT, and it's, you know, $250. But you don't have the food, and you run out and buy the knife, and then you go, well, I can't afford the food. Listen, you know, a knife's important, but having your basic needs met is the most important. So before you go out and spend that extra money, because listen, we live in a materialistic world, we live in a consumer world. You know, we can get on Amazon anytime, pop up, order something, next day pops in, there you go. You know, you're buying stuff. But are you taking care, or do you have a baseline of food, of water, of your medical supplies, of the basics that you need for survival? And so this is one story that happened with Faraday down in Argentina when they had their economic collapse back in 2001. In this book, I highly recommend it, guys. And I've said this over and over on this channel. It's the Modern Survival Guide for the Coming Economic Collapse. And you can put just Faraday in the search and you'll find it. And I don't have an Amazon link. I'm not, you know, it's not an affiliate link or anything. Just get that book. It's really important. One of the things he said, he had an old Rambo survival knife when he was a kid. And when all this stuff happened, he found that knife and it took him through the entire crisis. He said, I used that. He said, it was beat up but he said, for the things I needed, I used this knife. He said, it saved my life a number of times. Don't get hooked up on just having the best of the best. Listen, I like the best of the best personally. I like it. But if I don't have food in my pantry, but I got this $100 knife, what good? Knives are basic tools. You need to have a knife, but be careful not to prioritize for the wrong things. Make sure that you get those things together. Now, again, 1 month, I just recommend having those supplies set out, having your pantry full, and then again, building up as you can. As you get it balanced, as you get it prioritized, then you can start the next move into the next point. So, you know, it's one of those things that really takes some discipline, because it's so easy to see that ad and to run out and buy something new. Okay, so one of the things that I try to do is I try to come back to the basics and I go, what does it take just to live? Now, the rule of threes will definitely put you in that mindset, but what does it take? What am I going to need just to get by? What is my family going to need to be able to take care of things where we can have the things that we need and we don't have to worry about it? I mean, again, water, food, medical. I mean, they're basics, and we've talked about it a number of times. And having that. Now, we're going to get into specifics about some water, food, those things in just a second. We're going to I'm going to stop here for a second. If we have some questions, you know, go ahead. We can go ahead and start taking some questions. Do we have anything? And we'll go ahead and move to, and then we'll continue on. I like to get your feedback. A lot of people enjoy it. And two, it helps the community when you guys can pipe in, because it gives us a well-rounded look at things. Yes.
Damien asked, EDC check, what knife and gun you carrying today?
Well, I'm carrying a SIG P365. I'm also carrying my Olight, and this is the Warrior Mini, which they went to the Mini too, because this one can come on, but it's a really quick short close out. I mean, I can take it and I just hold the button at moonlight setting, and then when it goes off, it shuts off. I love this. I carry the Microtech LUDT. Actually, I was using it in my shop. It's sitting in my shop right now. And then, you know, I typically don't carry a multi-tool. I like to have them handy, but I do have my keys on my key bar. I love this. It's heavy, but this is a great way to keep your keys. And, you know, my billfold, my phone, my watch. But those are the things I always check. Nothing fancy would be upset with me if I didn't have my knife on me, but I did. I was using it to open a box and I set it down. So you caught me.
Dan Hauer asked, what is a good affordable solar generator?
Okay, there are a number of different ones. One thing that I would look for is high wattage. You know, you can actually go on to Home Depot and to Lowe's, and they have a number of them. We've been looking at the 4 Patriots. They have one. In fact, a good friend of mine just bought one. I haven't talked to him yet when he's gotten it in, but that was running a refrigerator with an ice maker and the freezer and everything, doing a great job with it. We had the humbless power cell with, and it's really quiet. One thing I really love about it. And we have the panels. That's a really good one. That's a premium one, in which I highly recommend it. But go to Home Depot or Lowe's, look and try to get the highest wattage that you can get, because it'll give you more capability. And one thing that I love about solar generators, which we also have gas powered generators, but the solar generator is quiet. A gas powered generator is loud, and that can be a signature. And then, of course, having a home generator, which you actually can attach it to your home. Those things are about 10 grand, but those are probably the top of the food chain.
Kevin Walker asked, "Hey Don, how can you protect your home from an EMP or CME?"
Well, there's a lot of theories out there, and and the U.S. government has been doing a lot to harden, military bases, vehicles, things like that. But as far as, for me, we have some of these Faraday bags which we can put stuff in, especially electronics like flashlights, things like that, that might have, chips in them. But one thing is if your phone, you might want to protect it, but who knows when one can happen. Your radios, that's a great place to put it. Anything that has a microchip, you can put them in the bags. And really, there are some, in fact, these guys got in touch with me a while back about things you can actually attach to your car. I haven't tested them or anything, so I don't know. But there are some possibilities out there. Now, I wish I could give you more on that, because the threat of an EMP is increasing daily, especially with China using a lot of their missiles and a lot of the things they've been doing, a lot of their testing they've been doing lately. So it's something that I have gotten into before, and I've been a little bit slack about it, but I need to get back into it. But the problem is really with an EMP is once it happens, and the theory is that it can affect certain things. It may not affect others. We don't know, and it could be a limited area. But if you're in that limited area, it can be devastating. But wish I had a better answer for you, but it's one of those things which I really need to get back into.
Lucky 13 Driver asks, "Can you recommend some storage solutions for food in high humidity areas?"
One thing we do is take, our pails. We do a lot with number 10 cans. Number 10 cans are probably one of your best bets for that. We have a lot of long-term food storage that we keep. It has a 30-year shelf life. And the main thing is to keep it in a, damp free as much as possible. Obviously, with high humidity, that's going to be a problem. But keeping it in a dark area as well. Canned food, just basic canned food, will last indefinitely, pretty much, unless it's dented or it's messed up, because of the processes and the heat that goes into processing these in the sterile environments. They really will last 100 years. So canned food is one of those things, and we're going to get into that in a minute, that I've really been big about. But also, oxygen absorbers are going to help, especially if you have dried beans and rice. Throwing in some oxygen absorbers or desiccant and being able to pull that moisture out, if it does, and get into your preps. But we have fairly high humidity here, and so it's definitely one of those things. But we don't have a lot of problems with our food that's honestly sealed.
Merrick Loff asks, "In my area, the prime thing is flooding. How can I best prepare for a flooding situation?"
That's a tough one. One thing I would invest in are sandbags, a lot of sandbags. And, obviously you're going to have to fill those. That's one thing that kind of keeps it up. If there are some things you can do around your property, it's just according to where you are. One thing I would be really prone to do is to look for areas that go toward high ground. So if I need to evacuate, where am I going to go? There's a bridge here that's going to be out, and that's the way I take, but how can I get around that? And make some contingency plans based around flooding that will get you out of those situations. Years ago, we had a big creek that ran behind our house. And it was like 30 feet wide. It was really a river. And that would flood, and it would flood over the banks. And sometimes there was a bridge down below us. And one night I came flying down through there and had a little MG midget and went onto the bridge, and it almost covered the top of the car. It was so high. And how it didn't short out my distributor cap, I don't know. But we ended up getting it. We had to get out, which was dangerous as heck. And I was in my early 20s, and we pushed it through. A lot of people die that way, by getting a car and saying, I think I can make it through that area, and then get flooded and the car gets washed away, or they get washed away if they get out of their vehicle. It was a totally wrong thing to do. It worked out, but that is one big thing. Also, I would have something in my car. Of course, now with computers, we don't have the standard, distributor caps and things that used to short out when you'd get water in it. So, but yeah, the big thing I would do is have my plan together to evacuate if I need to, and then have a plan to get to where I need to go. And so really, and then try to protect your home as much as you can. It may not be possible, but again, sandbags are a great thing that are used, especially by emergency services all over the world, to keep, build some kind of levee to keep that water out.
Mountain Shooter asks, after you have the basics covered, then prep for a specific event in your area?
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing about it is, like, we have tornadoes here, and one of the things I looked at was a storm shelter. You can buy storm shelters. Actually, I keep mentioning Lowe's, but Lowe's actually offers these shelters. They can dig into the ground and you can put them in there. The problem is with most of them is they have a door that opens out. And if a limb or something fell on that, or whatever, debris, and of course in a tornado, it could go anywhere. You could be trapped in there. It could be a tomb. So you have to think about it ahead of time. Think about in your home where you're going to go is a safe room. Have all these plans laid out ahead of time instead of last minute. We have one room in the center of our house that's low, and we have everything in there we can use. But yes, hurricanes, definitely. I mean, if you're prone to an area of hurricanes, you need to have those preps ahead of time. But when you're planning, let's say you have your month plan, that will assist you with a storm. It'll assist you with power outages. It'll assist you in all those things, and actually give you a leg up on most people. So yes, but that's a good point. If you have earthquakes, tornadoes, fires, whatever, is to make your plans ahead of time.
DZ Wren asks, question for Sensible Prepper. Would it be a good idea to build a separate emergency bag for your pets?
Yes, because you love your pets. I mean, we love our animals, and it's important. Whether it's even like harnesses to keep them in check with leashes, good solid leashes. We don't have those for our bigger dogs, but we do have them for our pug. So when we're out and about, we have collars and we have leashes, but having that harness would be great. And also you can even buy them that have things they can carry part of their food with them if they need to. And in a bug out, that'd be great. Instead of having a bunch of supplies on you, is to allow your dogs to do the work. So yes, I definitely think that having taking care of your animals and thinking ahead of time, is definitely humane, and we love them just like family. So it's important.
Justin Hopkins asks, what are the best options after you have run out of room at your primary location?
Well, one thing that we do, and I've actually put a video about this, is we have a storage building. It's an offsite cache, and it's me and a buddy of mine who's actually part of our prepper group, and we have basic supplies there. And now I don't keep water in there, but I do keep a filter, and we do have food there, and I even have some other supplies that are emergency supplies. So if for some reason I'm out somewhere and I can't get to my home, we've got that. Or if I need to pack in things and head out, we've still got, storage away. And you can, friends, people that have extra room, you can definitely use that as well.
Sean Kirkwood says, hey, Sootch, just a request. You should do a video on how to pack your bug out bag.
That's coming. That's coming with the Prepper Survival School. One thing I do want to mention, and I talked about this a while back, is bugging out is a horrible idea. If that is your plan, you shouldn't have that plan, because all that makes you is a glorified refugee. Now, with that said, there are times where you need to evacuate. We had a train wreck a few years ago, and it spilled out contaminants, and they had to evacuate 1,500 people, and they had to get them out within an hour. They had 1 hour to get their stuff and get out, and then they were out for 2 weeks. So, having, you say, well, I'm going to stay where I am. You may not be able to physically stay. And so you may have to go, and you need to have that plan. But my big focus is a get home bag, having something in my vehicle at all times. We're also going to talk about that. So yes, we're going to get to those.
Papa Burns says, Sootch, you have talked about the basics, but I've not heard from anybody talk about the mental aspects of bad situations that can happen.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's some levels, and I did a video a while back saying the number one survival tool is your mind, and it's getting mindset. And one of the things about it, when things happen, and I'll give this example. When Frodo in the movie Lord of the Rings, Frodo's talking to Gandalf, and he's really just overwhelmed with the responsibility that he has, and he goes, "I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? I want to go back to the Shire. I don't care about this. This is not right for me to have this burden on me. Things are too crazy." And Gandalf looked at him and he said, "So do all else who find themselves in this situation." He goes, "But we just have to do what is laid before us." And one of the things you have to, once you start prepping and you're putting together supplies, it allows you, number one, not to be in a panic if things happen, but also it allows you to step back and make wise decisions, and actually think a little clearer. It does give you a sense of peace of mind when you do have supplies put back. And of course, one thing you'll think about is, well, do I have enough? And that's where balance comes in, is having a well-rounded plan together. So mindset is important. I mean, there's some people that just can't deal with certain things, but we need to toughen our mind. And guys, one of the things that'll toughen our minds more than anything is pain and dealing with pain. Pain is one of the things that teaches me more than anything else. And one of the things that a buddy of mine told me recently when I had a kidney stone, he said, pain is weakness leaving the body. And I thought, what the heck? Later on, it really came into play because I was really hurting. And I just thought, what am I going to learn from this? How is this going to make me tougher? And so we need to toughen ourselves and make ourselves ready to face whatever. We live in a very spoiled society, just like that, running up to Best Buy and grabbing a camera and just like, whatever, I can grab this camera, and then not being able to. There are things that are coming, and they are coming. Transportation shortages, labor shortages, all that stuff, that we're going to have some issues coming up. And so it's important to harden your mind, get it ready and prepared. We're going to go to one more question, then we're going to jump back into it.
Michael Friday asks, I have multiple life straws and Sawyer filters. I also have 5 cases of water, but I don't have room in my house to store 900 gallons of water. What is your suggestion?
My suggestion, and actually, it's funny, I thought about this when we were planning it, and we're going to get into it with water. A lot of people do live in apartments, and there's only a limited room. There's just not enough room. One thing that I feel like it's one of the best investments is a Berkey water filtration system. Well, we have one, and we actually used one for a number of years and then bought the bigger one because it doesn't matter. We can get water even if we have to go down to the river and pull it up with buckets. But we don't have to store 1,000 gallons of water. We can filter the water that we need. I highly suggest having water handy, like, a few, but after a while, you just can't keep all the water. So I really feel that the life straws are great, and the filter systems that, the portable filter systems are great, but that's a lot of work, and you're going to wear those things out. You're going to run through the water. So having something that really can take care of a volume of water, it'll fit on your counter this big, and yet it'll take care, like ours will take care of 12,000 gallons of water. It will filter that much. So can you imagine having 12,000 gallons of water stored up? Instead, I can have our pool, or I can have the creek or the river or the pond that's behind us. And if I have to, I can get that water, and we're not without water. So, and there are other comparable, but the big Berkey systems are some of the best, most tried systems out there. And it's a couple of $100, but it's vital, because in the rule of threes, it's 3 days without water, and you've got to make sure that you have water. With the cyber attacks, and also with some possible terrorist attacks on our infrastructure, it is probable that something's going to happen. In fact, I think it was in Pennsylvania. They had this drone. They found it, and it had this copper wire attached to it, and they were trying to get to 2 connections at this substation to short out the substation. Thankfully, the drone crashed before it could get to it. But if that copper wire had laid across both of those terminals, it could have actually shut down a large area. So there is some possibility that we could lose utilities. Okay, so with that being said, One thing about these cyber attacks and things like that, utilities are vulnerable. And actually, that was my next point. But one thing is when you're thinking about, how do I live? How do I do? Think about this. And we've done a number of videos on this. Ways, 20 ways to use, a paper clip for different things. 20 ways to use bandanas in a survival situation. Condoms. We've even done one on condoms. There's just everyday items and having multiple uses. Because what happens is if we're not careful, we have this mindset that we need this specific item to take care of this specific need. And the problem is because of marketing and everything, which is great, and it gives us a lot of choices, but we get locked into, well, this wrench, I need a wrench to pull off this bolt. But if we don't have the right size, what do? And you can actually add quarters to the side of that wrench and be able to shape it and shim it to where you can get that open. And sometimes if we're not careful, we don't think about these things. Different ways to make fire, different ways to do different things. We're getting ready to release a video coming right up on 20 ways to use safety pins. Some of them are everyday hacks. Some of them are important for survival. And so what happens is you're improvising and you're able to think outside the box. And it's really going to help you because you don't have to feel like you've got to have every supply that you need, because you can't do it. You just can't. And so it's impossible. Okay, so with utilities, that a possibility. Water filtration is very important. We're going to get that in a minute. But having some way to heat your home. Yes, we have in fact, we have two of those HVAC, units, and it heats the house. And they can go down and we can have some issues. But with winter coming, how are you set? Do you have a wood fire? Do you have a wood stove? Do you have, kerosene heaters? Do you have whatever to maintain that heat to keep your family warm, especially if you get down in the northern states down to, 20s and below, down to zero or negative. One thing that, you may not have that. You may live in an apartment. You're totally dependent on electric. Totally. One thing that I would recommend, there are a number of different small heaters that actually take little propane canisters. And there are adapters that'll take the big, like your grill kind of canisters. And you can hook that up, get into a small room, get your sleeping bags, even a tent. You can put it up, get your family in that room, and then you can maintain heat that way. And there are a number of different ways to do that. But you've got to figure out, how am I going to keep myself warm if the temperatures drop to a serious level, and we've got to keep our family warm. You can't necessarily, if you don't have a fireplace, you can't just build a fire in your home. The carbon monoxide and the smoke and everything else is going to cause a problem. Also, if you're looking at propane heaters, make sure that you're not purchasing one that you can only use in well ventilated areas. There's a lot out there, like big shop ones or ones you use outside, because you can have carbon monoxide buildup. So you need to make sure that those propane heaters are safe to use inside. And there are some other type options. If you have natural gas that runs to your house, making sure that you have, your kind of a heater that can attach to that, or you may heat your whole house with that. But also, again, those systems are vulnerable. So it may be something that you need to be able to maintain. Of course, the problem is, in a long-term situation, the propane is going to run out after a while. The kerosene is going to run out. And so thinking ahead, moving toward getting more self-sufficient is really the goal. And, if you need to buy a wood stove to put in your home, and man, this thing doesn't really fit here, but we need to have something, then, you can invest in that. All right, water. And we talked a little bit about water, but let's get into it, because 3 days, guys, 3 days, you have got to have water. Your body is made up mostly of water, and you getting dehydrated, it cramps up your body. It'll just put you in a bad situation. But if you're saying, well, I've got a pond out here, I've got water, or I've got a stream, there's cryptosporidium, there's giardia, there's microorganisms, there are metals, there are chemicals. You could have a dead animal upstream and not even know it. The water looks good, looks clear, but guys, you can't drink it. Don't drink it. Back during the Civil War, there was one story where a soldier was talking about, he was in the battle. I mean, they were having a battle right there. And there was a stream that ran through the middle of this field. And he was so thirsty, he couldn't go on. He said, I've got to drink something. And he fell down toward the creek. And when he went to drink, he said, just blood just poured. And then all of a sudden, he'd have a clear spot, and then blood would come down. And he would wait until he got that clear spot, and he would reach in, he'd grab the water, and he'd drink it. Now, of course, that was at a different time, and there weren't a lot of chemicals and things in the water, but it saved his life. And, but the thing is, you don't want to put yourself in that kind of situation for sure. So you need to be able to filter your water. Long term, you may have a lot of water at your house, but sooner or later it can run out. So having a filter gives you, it's just one of those force multipliers, especially like we talked about with the Berkey. It gives you a large container. You put the water in. We use it every day. We use it for our tea or coffee, all for cooking. We use it. But let's say that you have your water, you have your filter, and you have a stream that's about, a mile away. And you say, well, I'm going to go get that water. Number one, you got to figure out a way to carry that water. Do you have pails? Do you have a way to be able to carry it? You may be able to jump in your car and have some kind of container in the back of your car or your truck and drive down and get it. But then again, fuel may be out. So having ways and implements to be able to get water, to me, that is one of the most important things. Is if I need water and I don't have a well system and I don't have a stream, what am I going to do? And I've got to get down to it. I've got to be able to transport it. Once I get it home, how am I going to filter it? That is key, critical, long-term thinking. Short-term, a month, yeah, you can store up a bunch of water, but it's going to take up a lot of room. All right, we're talking about food. And here's one that I want you to consider, because it's really easy to go, you know what, we need food. And I used to do this. We did this a lot. I'd say, Shannon, run down to the store. We need to make sure we kind of build up some preps when you go to the grocery. And she would. She'd come home with a bunch of stuff, and we'd pack it away, and we were packing it away. We try to keep it, number one, rotated. We just went again through all of our preps and rotated everything out, making sure that all the dates were certain, and we have certain areas we need to use first. But the one problem is, if you don't have a plan, it's like going to the grocery store without a shopping list. You're just grabbing stuff on impulse. You need to have balance with your food. I mean, how many of us, when somebody goes, okay, let's go out to eat, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't know. And, oh, we had Mexican the other day. Oh, well, let's eat Italian. I had Italian. And, we're so picky. Our palates are so picky. Southern Prepper One, a few years ago, he took all the preps that he had over a year, and he decided, I'm going to see if I can live on this for a month. He couldn't do it. He started eating, and he started getting he just got tired. He got tired of the beans and rice. He got tired of the different things that he had. He quit eating, and he had a lot of work to do. And the one thing is about eating is not only is it going to keep you, fed and keep you from dying of hunger, but it's also going to put you in a situation to where you can't work. You're putting out calories when you're chopping wood or you're hauling things or you're doing stuff. And in a prep situation, an STH, man, I can't even say it now. When it hits the fan, how about that? You're going to be doing a lot of work. It's a lot of work because we're so used to the conveniences. When the work comes, are you expending calories? So make sure you have a good balance. One thing we do is we have our long-term food storage preps. I mean, we have 30-year shelf life. We have a bunch of it. It's over a year. To get into that, like when the pandemic hit, we didn't get into our long-term food storage because it's a lot of work to prepare. We just went to the store, picked up things we needed. We already had a bunch, but we just wanted to fill in some things. And so we were able to live on that during that time. We didn't have to do a lot. I mean, it was a peace of mind. But, we have the Mountain House foods. That's great and convenient, but you can't live on that over an extended period of time. MREs, those kind of things. Lifeboat foods, one thing we keep in our bags. But having a variety of food and having a balance, because you need to keep up your health. You need to be able to take care of things. I was reading a book recently talking about this survival situation where they ran out of vitamin C and they started to have scurvy. And, you just don't think about scurvy. My gosh, the pirates had scurvy, but you've got to have some kind of source for vitamin C. Pine needles, pine needle tea is a great source for vitamin C. Just knowing that is one of the things about prepping and, again, improvising to survive. Okay, so food. Let me see where we are. Okay, we got 15 minutes. Now, one thing that you also need to think about is your medical. give you a couple of examples. My dad just had a mini stroke 2 days ago. It's the reason why we didn't have our Tuesday live stream. He's now at the hospital and they're running tests and they're doing things. He's fine right now. But when it first happened, they couldn't get him into the hospital, not because of the pandemic, but because the cardiac floor, they had no rooms on the floor. And so they said, well, you know, of course, when he left the doctor's office, they were saying, you need to go to the hospital now. But there was nothing he could do, and go through the emergency room and sit there for 2 days and not see anybody. So you may think if something happens to me, I can just run up to the hospital. You may not be able to get treatment with all the streamlining they're doing. Your medical is on you. Now, obviously, with a heart, that makes things a little bit more complicated. But for basic needs, guys, make sure that you have your basics. First off, have your Advil, have your Imodium, have your Benadryl, you know, have Band-Aids. I know that sounds funny, but sometimes we run out of Band-Aids and we're like, oh crap, we're out of Band-Aids. Make sure that you have a good supply. Check your inventory and put those supplies in place. Tums, all those things. If you have acid reflux, you need to make sure you take care of those things in an extended period of time. So having that together to take care of the basics. Came down, had a kidney stone about a month ago. Man, I was out. I mean, it was rough. And Shannon went and got, you know, or actually my son Seth went and got the things I needed. And it helped me through lemons, water, all this different things. And, you know, but what if those things aren't available and you have a propensity to have those things? Make sure that you stock up on that stuff. And so medical is important. You may or may not be able to get medical care, and the hospital systems are strained right now anyway. Plus, you have the shortage of nurses and doctors that are leaving because of the mandates. So it gets kind of crazy. So those things are important, but also your trauma kits. You know, if things really happen, you know, not just a tummy ache, but if you have some serious problems, you need to be able to stop the bleed. You need to be able to get breathing going, at least until medical attention can get here, and it may not be able to get here if there is a crisis. So medical, while it's not sexy, I mean, a new Glock's much more fun to go out and buy than to buy, you know, $400 worth of medical supplies. But those $400 medical supplies are going to save your life in certain situations, whereas that another gun is not necessarily going to help. Okay, so let's go to security. Security is a big one. Now, security flows in between the rule of threes. Number one, you need to have personal security, just personal everyday when you're out and about. First rule of personal security is situational awareness, knowing what's going on around you, being aware, not getting on your phone, sitting there fiddling around, but being aware of the situation, seeing a problem, a potential problem, and avoiding it. Going down a dark area and avoiding it. Just saying, you know what, it's going to take me a minute longer to go this way, but it's just better to go that way. And so situational awareness is first off. Also, a non-lethal options. Non-lethal, guys, some of you guys can't carry, you know, and it may even be that, you know, in your past you have some kind of record and you just can't own a firearm. It may be that you live in Chicago and it's a nightmare to be able to get a concealed carry permit. So having non-lethal options. After watching all this with the pandemic and the riots that were going on the West Coast, one thing I realized is that pepper spray is vital to keep, because a firearm in one of those situations starts a big mess, and you can be shot, and you may even, like Kyle Rittenhouse with all that going on, you know, it becomes a political thing. And so firearms are not always the answer. So pepper spray is a good way, especially in a mob situation, to be able to use it and get out of the situation, to hit the road. Also, one of my top things, because you may not be able to have pepper spray, one of my top things is a flashlight. And a flashlight, and guys, I highly recommend you carry one that's a little bit larger, because I can use this as a security tool. I can use this as an impact tool. I can use it to get people off of me. Of course, I can blind them with the light, you know, and I've got this thing on shut off mode. But I can blind them with the light. And then, oops, using the wrong button. Look here, this thing, I'm going to tell you, these lights, because I know how great they are. I mean, these are some of the best lights. And we've done a lot of torture tests with them. But light is your number one security tool. And being able to use this, if you have a little short flashlight or you have one that's thin and it's not necessarily going to be able to be used as self-defense. So I highly recommend that, especially whether you're in it, you have concealed carry or not. I highly recommend that. Home security, very important. You got to have some way. One thing we have a driveway alarm. Once you hit the driveway alarm, we have a motion detector light that immediately comes on and lights up a huge area. And so that's one of our first defenses. And then it rings inside the house when somebody passes that driveway signal. But then we have our standard security, which we have cameras, we have our regular security. Investing in some kind of security is important, and you can get it fairly reasonable. I just put in the ring system on top of that. So I have a ring over at my house. Every time the ring goes off, my phone sends me a notification. I can actually talk to the person that's sitting there, that's whatever he's doing, or she. So that gives me security. So having multiple ways to have security, looking at your property, saying, what am I going to do if somebody attacks us or somebody, having some thoughts about your personal security. Okay, let's go to some questions. And we got a few minutes, and we're going to roll it down.
Mr. Anderson asks, can you recommend how to store in a desert climate? It gets 100 degrees out here.
It's tough. Yeah, that's really tough. Even I would even say with canned food, that would be tough. Finding some kind of way to shelter it would be good. Of course, temperature controlled would be good. If it really gets hot and you lose power, obviously, what are you going to do? So, but keeping it in a dark place, no sunlight. Sunlight's one of your number one problems with food or water, and keeping it as cool as you can. It may be in a garage, it may be super hot in there, but it's somewhat sheltered, even from the outside. So it's not going to quite be as hot. Keeping that room as cool as you can keep it. But honestly, I don't live in an arid environment or a desert environment. One thing that I thought was funny, though, there was a group, preppers, and this has been probably 10 years ago. These guys, they were in Idaho, and they had a building outside, just one of these metal buildings. And it would get super hot in the summer, and it would get freezing cold in the winter. And they had a bunch of food storage out there. And it was actually in plastic buckets. They had rice and beans and wasn't even sealed. And so after, I think it was 3 years they had it out there, they came out, opened up these buckets and looked at it. There was some discoloration, but it was still edible, and they were able to eat it. It had lost some of its nutritional value, but it was still edible. So I think one thing is especially with dried beans and rice and things like that, I think, that really helps, especially if you're in that kind of situation. And then keeping maybe things that have moisture in them inside the house to keep it cooler in an area. But yeah, that's a tough one, though. But, the fact is in the 1800s, there were, well, even before then, there were a lot of people that lived in that area that survived without electricity. So sometimes it's good to go back and see historically. I did a video on surviving the Chisholm Trail, and getting through those areas where people had everything they owned in a wagon, and they went. But historically, you can look and see what they did, and then possibly get some pointers. So,
Magic Prepper asks,
oh hey man,
what is your go-to rifle caliber for self-defense in an SHTF scenario?
Well, there's of course, it's according to whether it's handgun or rifle. I like, my preference is a 5.56 or 223, mainly because military police, that's their go-to, and it's very intuitive. I like the way that the AR works. A lot of guys like the AK, which is great, and I love AKs. But I tend to stick to things that are NATO. If it's 9mm, now I have 45s, 40, all that, but 9mm is my primary, 5.56 is my primary, and 308 for longer ranges. 6.5 Creedmoor is one of the best calibers for long range out there, and I have some, but that's not my primary. That is I have it and I love it, but 308 is my primary. So I try to stick with those NATO calibers. I've always thought that way, making sure that, I have the calibers that if I may find a cache of ammo or whatever, something that's common, something that's easier to find than other things. So that's kind of the direction I go. And of course, 12 gauge.
Matt asked, join late. What all things do you have in your get home bag? I've got spare mags for my carry and a belt holster, food, water, lifeboat and filters, first aid, and charger for my phone.
Yeah, those are good. We are going to be doing a complete video series with this coming up in the prepper school. Make sure you have a fire kit, and having multiple ways to create fire. One thing I like to do is have a saw, some kind of saw, and I love the silky saws. They are phenomenal. Or clippers, having some kind of clippers. One thing I've been using lately is putting a pry bar in my bag because I may need the leverage to be able to get something. A fixed blade knife is important. Flashlights with batteries, your water filtration, but also a container to have. And also, one thing I keep in all my bags, even some of the smaller ones, is a heavy meal trash bag. And you go to Lowe's, you get a contractor's bag, Home Depot. They're really heavy meal. There's a bazillion uses for it. Keep a bandana in there as well. But again, we're going to go through and have a whole segment on your get home bag, bug out bag. What's the difference? And we're going to look at some of the contents.
John Bellinger says, will this water filter do anything for salt water as far as the Berkey?
No, it takes osmosis to be able to remove the salt. It's a pretty expensive process. There may be something newer. It's one of the things that when my wife was, we were talking about the pool, and there was a fad to do salt water, and I told her, I said, no, that's, I didn't tell her like that, but I said, no, I said, we need to keep it fresh because we need to be able to, that's one of our preps is our pool. Now it's not the same as seawater, but seawater is going to be a hard one. But if you have brackish water that goes behind in inlets and, canals and things like that, you're going to need to filter that water, and typically you can with a Berkey, but not salt water or straight up salt water.
Lucky 13 drivers ask, hi Don, do you think barter items are worth having in our preps?
Barter items are essential. They are essential. And the reason why I say that is because you can't have everything. And you may have a really nice shovel and it may just break for whatever reason. And you need a shovel, but you don't have one. You may have, there's maybe somebody has two shovels, but they're like, well, I want to barter with you. Having barter items are the best way to be able to facilitate that. Also, precious metals are a huge thing. And that's one thing we are also going to address. But yeah, or ammunition, those kind of things. But yes, barter items are, to me, one of the essential parts, whether it's cigars, which I love cigars, so I stock up on them in my humidor. And if I need to, I can trade them out. Liquor's a big one. It lasts a long time. It can be used for a number of different things. We did a video about it. So yes, barter items are essential. They're essential because they're gonna be like currency to the things that you've forgotten about, you don't have, or you just need.
DZ Wren says, Sensible Prepper, I have been looking at upgrading the electrical in our house to be able to plug a generator directly into the house for electricity. Any advice to getting that done?
Well, there are a lot of electricians out there that do it, and they can set you up. So yeah, I think that is one of the best ways. If of course, really the best, the top of the top is to have one of the big generators brought in and actually attached, and you can just flip a switch. Gas powered generators, they need fuel and they're loud, but they are good to have. Because they can get you through certain situations. A solar powered generator has its limitations, but it's also quiet, and you've got your sun, and so there are a number of ones. But yes, what I would do is, because we looked at this a few years ago at our other house, electrician, we had him come out and he said, yes, I can do this, and he can do it. So, and I would highly recommend letting a good electrician do it. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. So what we're going to do next week will be on volume 4. And we've got a lot of stuff, guys. We're going to keep this going. This is in a playlist, so you can go back and look at 1, 2, 3. And we're going to get more detailed as we get into it. And we will do specifically like water. We'll do specific like food and some things like that as well. Bug out bags, get home bags. Also, your self-defense and your security. There's a lot of stuff. And I think that this hopefully will be helpful. We do thank Sportsman's Guide for sponsoring today's episode. You get $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Sootch, Sootch, no 00. And if you're part of their buyers club, get a better price and you get free shipping. Guys, I'm telling you, it's a great resource. I've been buying from Sportsman's Guide way before I started kind of working with Sportsman's Guide. So a big fan. They're great people to deal with on top of that. So anyway, guys, we really appreciate the great questions. Thank you for so many, and really appreciate it. Hopefully you're getting some things out of this. And again, we're going to get more advanced as we go along. But number one, guys, if you're just getting started, 1 month and get those items that you have, the water, the food, the medical supplies, and your security, along with, other basics just to get you through. Make sure you get those done first, and then you can expand on them. Don't get a year's supply of food and not have a way to filter water. And again, don't say, oh, I can't afford that food, and then you run out and buy a $100 knife. We've got to think logically, and we've got to think, because this is important, and you got to put priorities in order. Really appreciate Sarah Mack for being over there monitoring the questions and getting everything together. And we really appreciate you guys for stopping by. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.